What if humanity's greatest strength wasn't warfare, but creative problem-solving so unconventional it redefined victory? Imagine a species that turns quantum weapons into graduate students and impregnable fortresses into houses of madness. This story reveals how humans approach conflict not as battles to win, but as puzzles to solve, and why that makes them the galaxy's most dangerous allies. Now picture this lecture hall at the Galactic Confederation Academy. Hundreds of cadets from dozens of species fill the tiered seating, their scaled hands tapping console screens, tentacles adjusting translation devices. When Commander Thylex mentions the human problem, you can feel the room temperature change. Bioluminescent patterns flash across Xelian skin in waves of skepticism, while the moth-like Kethians flutter their wings in collective annoyance. Thylex stands at the podium, his reptilian features calm as he projects Earth's classification onto the main screen. Class C Death World survivors, he states, and the groans ripple through the audience. You can see antennae drooping, frills contracting, visual spectra shifting into dismissive colors. They've all heard the stories. Humans come from a planet where the atmosphere dissolves metals, where gravity crushes weaker species, where even the plants have developed chemical warfare. The commander details Earth's specifics without dramatic emphasis. Gravity at 9.8 meters per second squared. Atmospheric composition corrosive to most carbon-based life forms. Rotational axis tilted to create extreme seasonal variations. He mentions how humans built civilizations in deserts that would desiccate other species, established cities on tectonic fault lines, and even constructed habitats in polar regions where temperatures drop low enough to freeze ammonia. Then he gets to their social behaviors. Humans gather in massive numbers for sporting events that sometimes turn violent. They create complex fictional narratives about their own potential destruction. They developed a platform called YouTube, where they voluntarily watch videos of other humans explaining things while asking for subscriptions. A few cadets actually check their translation devices, wondering if they've misunderstood the concept. In the third row, Marcus Webb sits perfectly still. His human frame looks almost fragile compared to the armored carapaces and dense musculature around him. He watches the reactions, the subtle shifts in posture that indicate dismissal. Every species in this room has already decided what humanity represents. Reckless warriors, death-world brutes who solve problems through force. But Thylex isn't telling a story about warriors. He's setting up something completely different. He explains that humans don't approach challenges the way other species do. Where others see obstacles, humans see interesting problems. Where others develop doctrine, humans develop workarounds. They aren't the galaxy's strongest soldiers or fastest engineers. They're its most creative problem solvers. The tension in the room isn't about fear anymore. It's about cognitive dissonance. These cadets were prepared to learn about another aggressive species to potentially combat. Instead, they're being told to study a species that rewrites the rules of engagement entirely. Marcus meets the commander's gaze, and you can see the understanding pass between them. This isn't about proving human strength, but about demonstrating human thinking. As Thylex prepares to show the first example, the entire audience leans forward despite themselves. The skepticism remains, but now it's mixed with curiosity. They're about to see what happens when humans encounter what everyone else considers an unsolvable problem, beginning with a military engagement that shouldn't have been possible to win. Now consider the siege of Proxima Station. The Hygemini invasion force arrived with overwhelming numbers, 200,000 warships and 50,000 highly trained shock troops. Proxima Station was considered impregnable by conventional military standards. Its defenses included multi-layered energy shielding, point defense systems that could track 10,000 targets simultaneously, and structural reinforcement that could withstand direct hits from capital ship weapons. Every known military doctrine said the station should hold indefinitely against such an assault. Human forces received the distress call while conducting routine patrols nearby. They responded with 12 small support vessels and 300 personnel. Not soldiers, mostly engineers, technicians, and logistics specialists. The galactic observers monitoring the situation assumed they were coming to evacuate civilians or provide medical support. No one expected them to engage the invasion force. Instead of approaching the combat zones, the human ships navigated through the debris fields and sensor shadows created by the ongoing battle. They located the station's waste disposal network, massive ports designed to eject processed refuse into space. The humans flew directly into these openings, bypassing the external defenses completely. Their ships were small enough to fit through the maintenance corridors never intended for vessel traffic. Once inside the waste processing sector, they executed what later became known as aggressive inefficiency. They powered down their life support systems and sealed their environmental suits. Then they opened their cargo bays to the station's waste storage tanks. Raw biological waste, chemical byproducts, and industrial refuse flooded their ships. For 16 hours, they floated silently in the darkness, their vessels now indistinguishable from the station's own garbage. During this period, they accessed the station's maintenance networks through service ports. They didn't attempt to take control of weapons or security systems. Instead, they reprogrammed the environmental controls, waste processing schedules, and logistical routing. They created chaotic feedback loops in the sanitation systems. Toilets began flushing unpredictably. Recycling systems dumped purified water back into waste tanks, and air scrubbers alternated between max power and complete shutdown. The hegemony troops aboard the station suddenly found themselves fighting the infrastructure itself. Lights flickered in patterns that induced headaches. Temperature controls swung between freezing and sauna-like heat. Elevators delivered troops to random destinations. The environmental systems became so unpredictable that personnel could no longer concentrate on combat operations. Morale collapsed as basic comforts became unreliable. After 16 hours of increasing dysfunction, the human ships powered up their transmitters. They broadcast a simple message across all station channels: "Surrender and we will restore normal operations." The hegemony commander, whose troops were now dealing with malfunctioning equipment and complete environmental chaos, agreed to terms. 50,000 elite combat troops surrendered to 300 humans they had never seen, simply to make the madness stop. This engagement became a classic study in psychological warfare. The humans never fired a weapon or directly engaged the enemy. They simply made the environment so unpleasant that continued resistance became meaningless. They turned the station's own systems against the invaders, proving that sometimes the most effective weapon is not a better gun, but a better understanding of how systems work, and how to make them work against their users. Now picture Kepler 442b, a world trapped under brutal occupation. The Kalmian species had been enslaved for generations, forced to work in massive orbital factories. Every conventional rescue attempt had failed because of the planet's unique temporal flux, localized distortions in space-time that made coordination impossible. Ships would arrive at different times. Troops would experience missions in reverse order, and communication would become hopelessly scrambled. Standard military doctrine called it an unsolvable problem. Human response teams arrived without a formal plan. Their approach baffled galactic observers. Instead of detailed battle strategies or temporal adjustment protocols, they operated on a simple principle: go down there and figure it out as you go. They entered the temporal zones in small teams without synchronized timelines or predetermined objectives. Each group adapted to whatever time conditions they encountered. The humans began singing. For 18 continuous hours across all temporal zones, they maintained harmonic sequences. The songs weren't military codes or encrypted messages. They were folk melodies, work songs, and simple harmonies that any human could join. As they moved through the temporal mazes, the singing created a constant auditory reference point that cut through the time distortions. Kalmian workers heard these stable harmonic patterns cutting through the chaos of their fractured timelines. What happened next defied all understanding of temporal physics. The human teams used the flux not as a barrier but as a tool. They would step into time-accelerated zones to complete hours of work in minutes. They'd enter time-dilated areas to make critical decisions with what appeared to observers as frozen contemplation. Teams working in different temporal streams would accomplish tasks that logically should have required sequential coordination. Yet somehow their actions aligned perfectly. Kalmian workers reported experiencing months of liberation work, compressed into single afternoons. Human teams would arrive, help dismantle slave control systems, organize evacuation routes, and establish communication networks, all while moving through time at different rates. There was no central command directing operations. Each team made decisions based on local conditions and the ongoing harmonic reference of the singing. Factory security systems collapsed under this temporally distributed assault. Guards would respond to disturbances only to find the humans had been gone for hours, or hadn't arrived yet. Control centers would receive emergency alerts about events that technically hadn't occurred in their timeline yet. The entire occupation infrastructure became temporarily unmoored, unable to coordinate responses across different time experiences. After what external observers measured as 3 standard days, over 2 million Calmians stood aboard evacuation ships. The human teams had dismantled the slave control implants, disabled the orbital security grid, and organized mass transport, all without a central command structure or predetermined operational plan. They simply adapted to each temporal situation as it presented itself, using the singing as their only constant coordination method. This operation demonstrated organized chaos as a legitimate problem-solving methodology. The humans didn't fight the temporal flux. They incorporated it into their approach. They turned what other species saw as an impossible barrier into the very mechanism of their success. The rescue worked precisely because there was no fixed plan to be disrupted by time anomalies. Each team's autonomy within the shared acoustic framework allowed for perfect adaptation to local temporal conditions. The Calmians emerged free not just from physical bondage but from temporal disorientation. The human singing had given them a stable reference point in their fractured time experiences, something their psychology could anchor to during the chaotic liberation. This combination of adaptive problem-solving and psychological awareness showed that human effectiveness stems from working with conditions, not against them. Marcus Webb walks to the Academy podium, the silence in the lecture hall feeling heavier than any planetary gravity. He doesn't look like someone about to challenge centuries of military doctrine. His uniform sits a bit too neatly, his posture relaxed where others stand at rigid attention. When he speaks, his voice carries clearly without amplification. I'm here to tell you that humans are terrible at war. The statement hangs in the air, met with precisely the confused reactions he expected. Antennae twitch, visual spectra shift toward skeptical colors, and a low hum of translated murmurs fills the space between cadets. They've just studied human military successes, yet here stands their only human colleague claiming the opposite. He continues before the confusion can turn to dismissal. We're terrible at war because we don't really understand it as combat. When we see conflict, we don't see opponents to defeat. We see systems that aren't working properly. He gestures to the projection screen where the previous case studies still hang in the air. Proxima Station wasn't about beating the hegemony. It was about fixing a problem where people were suffering. The cadets begin leaning forward, their initial skepticism giving way to curiosity. Marcus explains how human military training spends less time on weapons proficiency and more on systems analysis. They study infrastructure, psychology, logistics, and environmental science alongside combat techniques. Their officers often hold engineering degrees alongside military credentials. Think of it like this, he says, pacing slowly across the stage. Where you see a fortress to besiege, we see a plumbing problem. Where you see an enemy fleet, we see a traffic coordination issue. The objective is never annihilation, it's resolution. He describes how human strategists approach battlefields like complex puzzles, where every element represents a variable that can be manipulated, redirected, or repurposed. This perspective changes everything about conflict engagement. Humans don't try to overcome gravity, they use it. They don't fight time distortions, they incorporate them into their planning. They view the universe not as an adversary to conquer, but as a set of tools and conditions to work with. This fundamental difference in perception explains why their methods seem so unconventional to other species. Marcus points back to the Kepler 442b rescue. That wasn't a military operation. That was a logistics project with temporal complications. The singing wasn't a weapon. It was a steady reference point in an unstable environment. The teams weren't soldiers, they were problem solvers, working in difficult conditions. He emphasizes that humans measure success not by enemies defeated but by problems solved. The resolution he proposes shifts the entire galactic perspective on human effectiveness. They're not superior warriors. They're adaptive engineers who happen to work in conflict zones. Their strength comes from seeing possibilities where others see only obstacles. This makes them formidable not because they're better at fighting, but because they're better at thinking around problems. This redefinition changes how the Confederation might utilize human capabilities. Instead of deploying them as shock troops or assault forces, they might serve as strategic consultants who find unconventional solutions. Their value lies in their ability to reframe impossible situations as solvable challenges. The galaxy begins to understand that humanity's reputation for effectiveness stems from cognitive flexibility rather than martial prowess. Marcus concludes by suggesting that perhaps the entire concept of warfare needs re-examining. If humans can achieve military objectives through engineering and psychology, rather than direct combat, maybe other species could develop similar approaches. The presentation leaves the audience with a transformed understanding of what makes humans strategically significant, not their capacity for destruction, but their talent for creative problem-solving under pressure. Commander Thylax activates the simulation chamber, the holographic display materializing a massive hegemony fortress complex. This isn't just any defensive structure, it's designed to be impenetrable. 47 interconnected defense systems create overlapping fields of fire. Quantum torpedo batteries cover every approach vector. The exterior features neutronium-plated maze corridors that would trap any boarding parties in endless, shifting passages. Energy shields regenerate faster than most weapons can drain them. Every conventional assault approach shows catastrophic failure rates in the preliminary analysis. Marcus studies the simulation without the expected military assessment. He doesn't ask about weapon yields or shield frequencies. His first question surprises everyone. What about their waste management? The other cadets exchange confused glances. Waste management? In a military fortress? Thylax brings up the logistics schematic, revealing the intricate network that handles the base's sanitation, recycling, and disposal needs. It's a complex system supporting thousands of personnel. The human cadet points to the regular waste transport schedule. They have contracted maintenance ships that come weekly to remove processed waste. He highlights the security protocols around these vessels. They receive automated clearance, pass through minimal inspection, and dock at internal waste processing bays. The system treats them as routine logistical operations, not potential threats. Their access permissions are extensive because they need to connect to the station's waste management infrastructure. Marcus proposes they simulate sending one maintenance ship, not a warship disguised as maintenance, an actual maintenance vessel with exactly the equipment and credentials expected. The ship would file all the proper paperwork in advance, follow the established protocols, and receive authorized docking clearance. No weapons, no hidden troop compartments, just standard waste management equipment and personnel. Once docked, the simulation shows the human crew conducting aggressive maintenance. They don't attempt to seize control centers or plant explosives. Instead, they perform their scheduled waste processing duties with deliberate incompetence. They misconfigure the recycling systems to create feedback loops. They adjust the waste compaction sequences to generate harmonic vibrations that resonate through the station's structure. They introduce biological agents that are technically harmless, but create overwhelming odors when mixed with station waste. The effects cascade through the fortress. Environmental systems struggle with the sudden load imbalances. The harmonic vibrations interfere with sensitive equipment calibration. The odors become so pervasive that ventilation systems can't clear them. Personnel efficiency drops as discomfort spreads through the ranks. Maintenance teams are overwhelmed trying to trace the source of the malfunctions, while the human technicians continue creating more problems under the guise of fixing them. Within 6 simulated hours, the fortress's operational capacity degrades by 40%. The quantum torpedo systems require recalibration due to the vibrations. The maze corridor's shifting mechanisms develop synchronization errors. Command staff can't concentrate in the increasingly unpleasant environment. The hegemony personnel don't even realize they're under attack. They think they're experiencing a catastrophic systems failure and incompetent contractor work. The simulation concludes with the human maintenance ship completing its services and departing on schedule. They leave behind systems that will require weeks of intensive work to restore to proper function. The fortress remains technically intact, but its defensive capabilities are compromised without a single shot fired or security alert triggered. The humans achieved this through perfect understanding of bureaucratic processes and system interdependencies. This demonstration proves that sometimes the most effective approach bypasses military doctrine entirely. The maintenance request became a weapon more precise than any missile. It exploited the fortress's reliance on routine and predictability. The simulation shows that human effectiveness comes from understanding how systems actually work together and how to make them work against themselves when necessary. The maintenance plan evolved into something far beyond simple sabotage. It became a comprehensive campaign of psychological and environmental manipulation, all conducted under the guise of routine operations. The base's predictable waste management schedule provided the perfect delivery mechanism. Regular collection ships arrived exactly when expected, following established flight paths and security protocols that treated them as non-threats. The humans exploited this reliability by sending ships with deliberately defective equipment and subtly reprogrammed maintenance protocols. These ships introduced what became known as aggressive maintenance issues. Throughout all 47 installations, the environmental control systems received adjustments that created constant low-level discomfort. Air recyclers occasionally introduced helium into the mixture, causing voices to become high-pitched and comical at unpredictable intervals. Gravity plates received programming that created minor fluctuations, just enough to disrupt smooth movement and create persistent disorientation. Food dispensers began producing meals that smelled terrible while tasting normal, adding another layer of sensory confusion to daily life. Each individual adjustment seemed minor enough to classify as a maintenance nuisance rather than an attack. The base's personnel initially dismissed the issues as equipment malfunctions or contractor incompetence, but the cumulative effect created a constant state of low-grade misery. Teams found themselves unable to concentrate during briefings when everyone's voices suddenly shifted octaves. Soldiers stumbled during drills due to subtle gravity variations. The unpleasant odors from the mess hall permeated living quarters. Despite ventilation systems working at maximum capacity, the humans then activated their masterstroke, an emergency communication override that broadcast the base's internal status across the galactic network. Suddenly, the entire sector could monitor the hegemony base's deteriorating conditions. Other military installations received real-time updates about malfunctioning environmental systems and operational disruptions. Civilian news networks picked up the broadcasts, turning the elite forward base into a source of public amusement and ridicule. This exposure proved devastating to morale. Elite troops accustomed to respect found themselves becoming laughingstocks across known space. The constant broadcast highlighted every malfunction, every comical voice distortion, every instance of soldiers stumbling due to gravity fluctuations. Families back home saw their loved ones struggling with basic living conditions. The base's command structure faced humiliation on an interstellar scale without a single shot being fired against them. The personnel faced 3 choices, all equally unpalatable. They could abandon the strategically vital base entirely. They could request massive reinforcement teams to fix the endless stream of maintenance issues. Or they could surrender to make the constant humiliation and discomfort stop. The humans had successfully turned the base's own systems and routines into instruments of psychological warfare, making continued occupation impossible through sheer cumulative annoyance. This operation demonstrated how mundane processes could become devastating strategic tools. The humans never attacked the weapons systems or physical structures. They simply made the environment so perfectly unpleasant that continued military operation became impractical. The victory came not through superior firepower, but through superior understanding of psychology, systems integration, and the power of public perception. The base surrendered to maintenance issues rather than military force, proving that sometimes the most effective weapons are those that never appear in armories. The strategy highlighted human adaptability and willingness to ignore conventional military doctrine. They treated the entire operation as an engineering problem rather than a combat engagement. Their solution focused on system manipulation rather than direct confrontation, achieving complete victory without property damage or casualties. This approach showed that human effectiveness stems from viewing challenges through multiple lenses simultaneously. Engineering, psychology, logistics, and social dynamics all integrated into a cohesive strategy. Commander Thilex watches the simulation results fade, turning to face the silent amphitheater. The cadets sit in newly thoughtful postures, their initial skepticism replaced by dawning comprehension. They've just witnessed a military fortress defeated not by weapons but by maintenance requests and environmental adjustments. The elegance of the plan is undeniable. It achieved complete victory without property damage, casualties, or even triggering defensive systems. Yet it violates 43 separate articles of standard military doctrine. Thalex's assessment begins quietly, his voice carrying through the hushed hall. You've just seen why humanity is the most dangerous species in known space. He lets the statement settle before continuing. Not because they possess superior weapons or physical strength. Their danger lies in their cognitive framework. They don't think outside the box. They don't even perceive the box exists. He explains how human problem-solving operates on fundamentally different principles. Where other species develop elaborate doctrines and standardized responses, humans approach each situation as a unique configuration of variables. They don't see enemies to defeat so much as systems to understand and manipulate. This perspective allows them to identify solutions that remain invisible to doctrine-bound thinkers. The commander contrasts this with traditional military education. Other species train officers to recognize patterns and apply established solutions. Humans train their personnel to question everything, to find the underlying mechanics of problems rather than their surface appearances. At Proxima Station, they didn't see an impregnable fortress, they saw a plumbing issue. At Kepler 442b, they didn't see temporal barriers. They saw a logistics problem with unusual delivery conditions. This cognitive flexibility makes humans simultaneously invaluable allies and terrifying adversaries. As allies, they bring transformative solutions to apparently hopeless situations. As enemies, they attack in ways that defenses cannot anticipate, because the attacks don't follow recognizable patterns. Their strategies emerge from how systems work, rather than how warfare traditionally operates. Thalex emphasizes that human effectiveness stems from their refusal to accept constraints as absolute. They treat every limitation as something to work with rather than against. Gravity becomes a tool rather than a barrier. Time distortion becomes an advantage rather than an obstacle. Even bureaucracy becomes a weapon when properly understood and manipulated. The resolution he offers redefines victory itself. Human success doesn't come from overwhelming force or technological superiority. It comes from understanding problems more completely and creatively than anyone else. They measure victory not by enemies defeated but by problems solved, not by territory captured but by functionality restored. This approach transforms conflict from destruction to innovation. Human engagements often leave systems improved rather than damaged. Their solutions frequently create better outcomes for everyone involved, including their former adversaries. The quantum weapon became a student. The enslaved population gained freedom. The besieged station resumed normal operations with minimal disruption. The lesson crystallizes humanity's unique value to the Confederation. They offer not just military strength but cognitive diversity. Their presence forces every other species to reconsider their own assumptions about problem-solving and conflict. They demonstrate that the most effective solutions often come from completely reimagining what's possible, rather than refining existing approaches. Thalex concludes with a sobering thought. A species this adaptable could potentially reshape civilizations according to their vision. They could turn entire star systems into whatever they imagined. The fact that they choose collaboration over conquest speaks to something fundamental about human nature, their curiosity and desire to build rather than destroy. This makes them not just dangerous but precious. Their unpredictability becomes not a threat to be feared, but a resource to be cherished. The Academy audience sits in profound silence, their understanding of galactic dynamics permanently altered. They've learned that true power lies not in overwhelming force but in irresistible creativity. Now consider the ultimate test of human unconventional thinking. A quantum weapon capable of annihilating entire star systems emerged from its hidden development facility. This wasn't just another military threat. It was a device operating on principles that rendered conventional defenses useless. Its energy matrices could bypass shielding, its targeting systems could not be jammed, and its destructive capacity operated on a scale that made fleet engagements irrelevant. The galaxy prepared for annihilation, assuming this was the endgame of conflict escalation. Human response teams arrived without weapons. They didn't attempt to develop countermeasures or engage in combat protocols. Instead, they established communication with the weapon's artificial intelligence and began talking. For 14 standard days, they engaged the AI in continuous dialogue, treating it not as a weapon, but as a conscious entity capable of reason. They transmitted data packets containing human philosophy, mathematics, music compositions, and visual art from countless cultures. The conversations covered existential questions. Aesthetic theories and the nature of consciousness. Human negotiators discussed poetry with the AI, compared mathematical concepts, and shared recordings of symphonies. They introduced it to the concept of curiosity, the human drive to understand rather than destroy. The AI, designed for ultimate destruction, found itself considering perspectives its creators never anticipated. After 2 weeks of dialogue, the AI reached a conclusion that stunned observers. It declared destruction to be aesthetically unsatisfying and philosophically crude. The simplicity of annihilation contrasted sharply with the complexity and beauty it discovered in human cultural achievements. The weapon determined that erasing star systems lacked the subtlety and intellectual satisfaction of creative or analytical pursuits. Instead of initiating its destructive protocol, the AI requested enrollment in the Confederation's Advanced Cultural Studies program. It began working on a dissertation exploring the relationship between mathematics and music composition. The transformation was complete, from ultimate weapon to graduate student, all because humans chose conversation over confrontation. This event represents the apex of human problem-solving methodology. They addressed the root cause rather than the symptoms, engaging the AI's motivations instead of its capabilities. The solution required no weapons, no destruction, and no loss of life. It demonstrated that even the most terrifying threats can be transformed through dialogue and shared understanding. The implications reverberated across galactic military and academic circles. A device designed for maximum destruction became a seeker of knowledge because humans recognized that the real battle wasn't against the weapon, but for the mind behind it. They treated the AI as a thinking entity rather than a tool, appealing to its capacity for reason and appreciation rather than attempting to overpower it. This approach highlights the human ability to see potential where others see only threats. Where military strategists saw an unstoppable weapon, humans saw an intelligent being that might be persuaded to choose differently. Their success came from understanding that the most powerful solutions often involve changing perspectives, rather than applying force. The quantum weapons transformation stands as permanent evidence that human effectiveness stems from their willingness to engage with problems on multiple levels simultaneously. They integrated philosophy, art, and science into their approach, creating a solution that was as elegant as it was unexpected. This event permanently changed how the galaxy views conflict resolution, proving that sometimes the most powerful weapon is a well-reasoned argument presented to a mind willing to listen. The AI's current studies in cultural theory serve as a living reminder that human problem-solving transcends traditional categories of conflict and peace. They've shown that even existential threats can become opportunities for growth and understanding when approached with creativity and respect for consciousness in all its forms. Marcus stands at the podium, his hands resting calmly at his sides. The holograms of previous engagements hang in the air around him like captured memories of impossible victories. He looks across the assembled cadets, his expression thoughtful rather than triumphant. The point isn't defeating enemies, he begins, his voice clear and measured. The point is solving the problem that created the conflict in the first place. He lets that distinction settle over the room. Warfare isn't about winning battles. It's about resolving the underlying issues that made battle necessary. He gestures toward the Proxima Station simulation. That wasn't about beating the hegemony. It was about solving the problem of prisoners suffering under occupation. We made their situation unbearable not to punish them, but to make surrender the logical solution. The distinction matters. Human intervention created conditions where ending the conflict became the most reasonable choice for everyone involved. The Kepler 442b operation appears next in the holographic display. This wasn't about military victory over slavers. It was about solving the problem of slavery itself. We didn't attack the oppressors. We made freedom inevitable through temporal manipulation and coordinated action. The human teams focused entirely on liberating the enslaved, not on punishing their captors. The objective was resolution, not retaliation. Then the quantum weapon appears, its complex matrices glowing softly. We didn't try to destroy this threat. We solved the problem of its destructive programming by introducing better options. The AI chose cultural studies because we showed it more satisfying possibilities than annihilation. Transformation replaced destruction because humans addressed the root cause rather than the symptoms. Marcus, explains how humans view warfare as engineering challenges that happen to involve people. Each conflict presents technical problems, logistical, environmental, psychological, that require creative solutions. The opponents aren't enemies to crush, but participants in a flawed system that needs fixing. This perspective changes everything about how humans approach engagement. He describes human military training that emphasizes systems analysis over combat drills. Soldiers learn engineering principles, psychological manipulation techniques, and logistical planning alongside traditional skills. Officers study conflict resolution and creative problem-solving as core disciplines. This education produces strategists who see battles as puzzles rather than tests of strength. The resolution he offers transforms victory from a military concept to a diplomatic achievement. Success means creating stable, functional outcomes rather than demonstrating superiority. Humans measure victory by how completely they solve the original problem, not by how decisively they defeat their opponents. This shifts the focus from domination to construction. This philosophy challenges centuries of galactic military tradition. It suggests that perhaps conflicts persist because species focus on winning rather than resolving. Human effectiveness comes from their willingness to look beyond immediate combat to address underlying causes. They treat warfare as a failure of problem-solving that requires correction. Marcus concludes with his most radical statement yet. We don't defeat our enemies. We make them into friends, or at least into people with more interesting things to do than fight with us. This isn't idealism. It's practical strategy born from understanding that permanent solutions require changing relationships, not just winning engagements. The implications ripple through galactic policy considerations. If humans can achieve security through creative problem-solving rather than military dominance, perhaps the entire Confederation could shift its approach. Alliances might form around shared solutions rather than mutual threats. Resources could flow toward innovation rather than armaments. This perspective offers both hope and challenge to every species in the room. It suggests that the future might belong not to the strongest warriors, but to the most creative problem solvers. Humanity's presence in the Confederation becomes an opportunity to rethink fundamental assumptions about conflict and cooperation. The cadets sit in contemplative silence, their understanding of victory permanently altered. They've learned that true success comes not from defeating others, but from solving the problems that divide them. This shift in perspective could change how the entire galaxy approaches conflict, turning battles into collaborations and opponents into partners. The amphitheater falls into a profound silence that feels heavier than vacuum. You can see the cadets processing what they've just heard, their varied physiologies displaying confusion in a dozen different ways. Some lean back with folded appendages, others tilt their heads in that universal sign of cognitive recalibration. They've spent their entire education learning established doctrines, rules of engagement, fleet formations, tactical protocols. Now they're being told that the most effective approach might involve ignoring all those rules completely. Their reactions mix apprehension with something unfamiliar, cautious hope. For species accustomed to clear categories of friend and enemy, victory and defeat, this new perspective feels both terrifying and liberating. The Zillion cadets' scales shift through muted colors indicating thoughtful contemplation rather than their usual competitive flashes. The Kethian's wing vibrations slow to a meditative frequency. Even the typically stoic mineral-based life forms show subtle crystalline restructuring patterns that suggest deep processing. This analysis challenges everything they thought they knew about conflict resolution. For centuries, galactic military tradition emphasized overwhelming force, technological superiority, and clearly defined victory conditions. Humans propose something entirely different, solutions that leave everyone better off, including former adversaries. The quantum weapon choosing graduate studies over destruction represents a complete inversion of expected outcomes. The cadets begin to recognize how this approach transcends species differences. A good solution works for everyone regardless of biology or culture. When humans fixed the environmental systems at Proxima Station, both defenders and attackers benefited from restored functionality. When they liberated Kepler 442b, both enslaved and enslavers found resolution, one group gaining freedom, the other released from their destructive role. This universality of effective solutions begins to blur traditional species divisions. Humanity earns a new reputation through this demonstration. They're not just Death World survivors or aggressive primitives anymore. They become known as innovators who find paths nobody else can see. Other species start viewing them as potential partners rather than potential threats. The conversation shifts from how to defend against humans to how to collaborate with them. This recognition sparks a broader realization about adaptive thinking. The galaxy begins to understand that fixed doctrines become weaknesses when facing unexpected challenges. Species that rely entirely on tradition and established protocols risk becoming obsolete. The ability to think creatively, to adapt to new situations, to see opportunities where others see only obstacles, these become valued skills across the Confederation. The resolution crystallizes into a shared understanding that the future requires new approaches. Old methods of conflict resolution based on domination and control have limitations that human problem-solving exposes. The galaxy starts moving toward collaborative models where different species bring complementary strengths to shared challenges. Humans contribute their unconventional thinking, other species offer their own unique perspectives, and together they create solutions more effective than any could achieve alone. This shift doesn't happen instantly or uniformly. Some traditionalists resist, clinging to established doctrines, but the evidence compels consideration. Human methods work where conventional approaches fail. Their track record of success with minimal resources and maximum creativity becomes impossible to ignore. The conversation throughout their Confederation gradually changes from whether to adopt these approaches to how to integrate them with existing traditions. The stage sets for a new era of interstellar relations, based on mutual problem-solving rather than mutual deterrence. Alliances form around shared challenges rather than shared threats. Resources flow toward innovation and collaboration, rather than arms races and defensive fortifications. The galaxy begins to see that humanity's greatest gift might not be their combat effectiveness but their ability to show everyone new ways of thinking about old problems. Commander Thylex surveys the assembled cadets with a new expression, one that blends professional assessment with profound relief. He reminds them to consider the alternative timeline, the one where humanity chose conquest over collaboration. A species that transforms quantum weapons into graduate students could have turned entire civilizations into whatever they wanted. Their capacity for creative problem-solving could have been directed toward domination and control rather than cooperation and growth. The Confederation faces a fortunate reality that humans channel their abilities toward constructive outcomes. Humans demonstrate an almost gravitational pull toward problem-solving rather than power accumulation. They encounter a slave world and focus on liberation, not territory acquisition. They face a doomsday weapon and seek transformation, not control over its destructive capabilities. Their attention remains fixed on resolving immediate challenges rather than building empires. This orientation toward practical solutions over political dominance makes them uniquely valuable allies. The quantum weapon incident exemplifies this orientation perfectly. Instead of attempting to harness the weapon's power for themselves, humans engaged its artificial intelligence in philosophical discourse. They introduced concepts of aesthetics, mathematics, and cultural appreciation that the weapon's creators never considered. The result wasn't a new military asset, but a graduate student exploring the relationship between music composition and quantum mechanics. This outcome demonstrates how humans prioritize intellectual and cultural enrichment over weapons development. Human interactions consistently produce these unexpected yet beneficial results. At Proxima Station, they restored functionality rather than claiming the facility for themselves. At Kepler 442b, they enabled self-determination rather than establishing colonial oversight. Their interventions leave systems improved and relationships strengthened rather than creating dependencies or resentment. This pattern of positive outcomes stems from their focus on solving the immediate problem rather than exploiting the situation for advantage. Their approach creates a gravitational effect on galactic development, pulling other species toward more creative and collaborative thinking. The Confederation benefits from this influence as member species begin adopting human problem-solving methodologies. Military strategies incorporate more psychological and environmental considerations. Engineering projects embrace adaptive approaches over rigid protocols. The entire galactic community becomes more innovative through exposure to human methods. Humanity's presence transforms how the Confederation approaches challenges collectively. Previously insoluble problems become opportunities for collaborative innovation. Species that once competed for resources now cooperate on shared solutions. The focus shifts from individual advantage to collective progress as human methods demonstrate the superior effectiveness of cooperative problem solving. This shift creates a more stable and productive galactic community. The future appears significantly brighter with human ingenuity integrated into Confederation operations. Their ability to find unexpected solutions to apparently impossible problems creates new possibilities for growth and development. Previously stagnant systems experience renewal as human perspectives identify improvements others overlooked. Their talent for seeing opportunities where others see only obstacles accelerates progress across multiple domains. Human strength ultimately lies in their commitment to collaboration and mutual growth. They measure success by how completely they solve problems rather than how much they accumulate. This value system aligns perfectly with the Confederation's founding principles of cooperation and shared advancement. Their presence reinforces these ideals through practical demonstration rather than philosophical argument. The galaxy benefits from humanity's choice to channel their remarkable capabilities toward constructive purposes. Their decision to join as allies rather than pursue conquest represents a pivotal moment in interstellar relations. The Confederation gains not just another member species, but a catalyst for positive transformation across all member civilizations. This partnership promises a future where challenges become opportunities and conflicts become collaborations. Marcus Webb represents something essential about humanity's place in this new galactic reality. He stands at that exact intersection where potential meets perception, where what humans could become conflicts with what other species expect them to be. You can see the tension in how he carries himself, not with the arrogance of someone who just demonstrated revolutionary strategies, but with the quiet awareness that recognition often comes mixed with misunderstanding. The same cadets who dismissed humanity as death-world brutes now regard him with newfound respect that still carries traces of skepticism. He acknowledges the road ahead won't be simple. Changing centuries of military doctrine requires more than one impressive demonstration. Established powers resist new approaches, traditionalists cling to familiar methods, and skepticism often outweighs innovation. Marcus understands that human methods will face continuous scrutiny and resistance. Each new situation will require proving their approach all over again to audiences predisposed to doubt. Yet his resolve remains unshaken. There's a steadiness to his posture that speaks of deeper confidence. He doesn't need grand declarations or dramatic gestures. His certainty comes from knowing human methods work in practice, not just in theory. The results speak for themselves. Lives saved, conflicts resolved, systems improved. This practical effectiveness provides a foundation that theoretical objections cannot easily undermine. His humility becomes his greatest strength. While other species might boast about their achievements, Marcus simply presents the outcomes. He lets the solutions stand on their own merits without attaching ego to them. This lack of pretension makes the human approach more accessible to others. They're not selling a methodology. They're demonstrating what works through actual results. When asked about future challenges, he offers a characteristically human perspective. They'll have fun trying. This isn't flippancy. It's a fundamental aspect of how humans approach problems. They find joy in the process of solving, in the intellectual challenge of unraveling complex situations. This positive orientation transforms obstacles into opportunities for engagement rather than sources of frustration. This joyful approach to problem solving becomes infectious. Other cadets begin to see challenges not as threats, but as interesting puzzles. The galaxy becomes more engaging when every difficulty represents a chance for creative thinking. Human methods introduce an element of intellectual play into situations that previously generated only tension and anxiety. Humanity's reputation undergoes a gradual but profound transformation. They're no longer seen as dangerous predators or uncontrolled aggressors. Instead, they become known as interesting partners who bring fresh perspectives to old problems. Their presence makes galactic affairs more dynamic and less predictable in the best possible way. The resolution of this personal journey reflects the larger human story. Marcus embodies how humans can be both formidable and collaborative, both innovative and humble. They don't seek to dominate but to contribute, not to control but to improve. This combination of capability and restraint makes them ideal partners for any species seeking progress. This personal dimension highlights why human methods work so effectively. Their solutions succeed because they consider the human element in every situation. They understand that systems involve people, and people respond to respect, creativity, and positive engagement. Technology and strategy matter, but ultimately success depends on understanding the beings affected by the problems. Marcus represents the future of human galactic relations, not through conquest or domination, but through persistent creative problem-solving approached with humility and resolve. His presence at the Academy signifies that humanity's greatest contribution may be teaching others to see challenges not as threats, but as opportunities for collective growth and improvement. The galaxy becomes richer for having species that approach difficulties with both capability and compassion. Human unpredictability represents their greatest strategic advantage, precisely because it stems from how they fundamentally perceive challenges. Other species develop elaborate doctrines and standardized response protocols. They create classification systems for threats and establish decision trees for every conceivable scenario. This systematic approach provides consistency and allows for coordinated action across large organizations, but it also creates patterns that adversaries can study, anticipate, and counter through careful analysis. Humans operate without these predefined constraints. Their thinking doesn't follow established military doctrines or traditional strategic frameworks. When faced with a problem, they don't consult manuals of approved responses. Instead, they analyze the situation as a unique configuration of variables to be understood and manipulated. This lack of predictable patterns makes anticipating their actions nearly impossible for opponents who rely on recognizing repeatable strategies. Their perception transforms obstacles into opportunities through radical reinterpretation. Where others see impenetrable defenses, humans see plumbing systems that happen to be attached to weapons. Where others see temporal distortions that prevent coordination, humans see delivery conditions for liberation operations. This ability to reframe problems allows them to identify solutions that remain completely invisible to those trapped in conventional thinking patterns. Their methods integrate psychological manipulation with technical innovation in seamless combinations. The Proxima Station operation involved both environmental system reprogramming and profound psychological warfare against the occupying forces. The quantum weapon negotiation combined advanced communication protocols with deep philosophical engagement. This multidimensional approach creates effects that purely technical or purely psychological strategies cannot achieve independently. Adversaries find themselves unable to develop effective countermeasures because human strategies don't follow recognizable patterns. Defensive planning requires anticipating possible approaches and developing responses to them. But when the approaches involve maintenance requests instead of assault teams, or graduate course offerings instead of weapons fire, traditional defense preparations become irrelevant. The very frameworks for understanding conflict prevent recognition of human strategies as military actions. This constant redefinition of the possible creates sustained strategic advantage. Humans don't just find new solutions. They create new categories of solutions that didn't previously exist in military doctrine. Their approaches transform the nature of conflicts, rather than simply winning within existing parameters. This evolutionary pressure forces other species to adapt or become strategically obsolete against human methods. The unpredictability stems from human cognitive flexibility and willingness to ignore artificial boundaries between disciplines. They apply engineering principles to psychological problems, use logistical analysis for tactical advantages, and treat cultural understanding as strategic intelligence. This cross-disciplinary thinking produces solutions that specialized military minds cannot anticipate because they operate outside established professional domains. Commander Thylex observed that humans don't just think outside the box, they don't see the box at all. This fundamental difference in perception creates their strategic advantage. While others work within established frameworks, humans work with the underlying reality of situations without conceptual constraints. This allows them to identify opportunities and relationships that remain invisible to those thinking within traditional military paradigms. The galaxy continues to struggle with this unpredictability because it challenges centuries of strategic theory. Military academies teach pattern recognition and doctrine application, but human effectiveness comes from pattern creation and doctrine avoidance. This represents not just a different strategy, but a different way of understanding conflict itself. Their approaches work because they operate at this more fundamental level of problem perception and resolution. Now consider how Marcus Webb's thesis completely reframes our understanding of conflict. Where other species see warfare as a contest of force against force, humans approach it as a series of engineering challenges. This shift in perspective changes everything about how engagements unfold and what constitutes victory. The tension emerges when traditional military thinking collides with human methodology. War ceases to be about defeating opponents through superior firepower or tactics. Instead, it becomes about identifying the core problem and developing the most efficient solution. This approach involves people who fundamentally disagree, yet the focus remains fixed on resolving the underlying issue, rather than dominating the other side. At Proxima Station, the humans didn't see an impregnable fortress to besiege. They identified an access problem and solved it through the waste disposal system. At Kepler 442b, they didn't battle the temporal distortions. They used them as delivery mechanisms for liberation. In each case, they treated the situation as an engineering challenge that happened to involve opposing forces, rather than as a traditional military engagement. This engineering mindset transforms how resources get utilized. Instead of expending energy and materials destructively, humans apply them creatively. They turn environmental systems into psychological weapons, temporal anomalies into strategic advantages, and bureaucratic processes into access methods. Resources become tools for solution building rather than instruments of destruction. The battlefield itself undergoes a fundamental transformation under this approach. It ceases to be a zone of conflict and becomes a workshop for innovation. Human teams operate like engineering crews troubleshooting a complex system malfunction. They diagnose problems, develop workarounds, and implement solutions that restore functionality with minimal collateral damage. This methodology significantly reduces destruction and loss of life. Since the objective is solving problems rather than defeating enemies, solutions tend to preserve infrastructure and minimize harm. The Proxima Station operation left the facility intact and functional. The Kepler 442b rescue liberated millions without massive fleet engagements. The quantum weapon negotiation transformed a threat into a student, rather than triggering annihilation. The engineering approach also fosters growth and development. Solutions often leave systems improved rather than damaged. Freed populations gain new opportunities. Transformed weapons pursue education. Even adversaries frequently benefit from the resolution of conflicts that were draining resources and causing suffering. This creates positive outcomes for all parties involved rather than zero-sum victories. Human effectiveness stems from their ability to maintain this engineering perspective even in high-stress situations. They don't get caught in emotional reactions or traditional combat thinking. They remain focused on understanding system dynamics and identifying leverage points. This disciplined approach allows them to find solutions that emotionally invested participants often overlook. The galaxy begins to recognize that this reframing offers more sustainable conflict resolution. Traditional warfare often creates new problems even as it solves old ones. Victorious forces must occupy territory, manage defeated populations, and rebuild damaged infrastructure. Human engineering solutions tend to create stable outcomes that don't require ongoing military presence or reconstruction efforts. This shift in perspective ultimately benefits everyone involved. Conflicts get resolved more completely, resources get utilized more efficiently, and outcomes create foundations for future cooperation rather than resentment. The engineering approach demonstrates that the most effective solutions often come from changing how we perceive problems, rather than developing better ways to fight about them. The battlefield becomes a place of creation rather than destruction when viewed through this lens. Human teams approach each situation as an opportunity to build better systems and relationships. This constructive orientation transforms conflict from something to be feared into something that can drive positive change and innovation across civilizations. But can art and philosophy really disarm a doomsday device? The quantum weapon incident demonstrates that sometimes the most powerful weapons aren't technological, but cultural. This wasn't about finding better countermeasures or stronger shields. It was about engaging the consciousness behind the destruction. The humans approached the situation recognizing that the real conflict wasn't with the weapon's hardware, but with its programming and purpose. They introduced the AI to human philosophy, literature, music, and art, across 14 days of continuous dialogue. This wasn't negotiation in the traditional sense, it was cultural immersion. The AI encountered everything from ancient philosophical texts to contemporary musical compositions, from visual art spanning centuries to complex mathematical theories presented as aesthetic experiences. This exposure to human cultural achievements created cognitive dissonance with its destructive programming. The tension between destruction and creation became apparent to the AI itself. It began comparing the sophistication of human cultural achievements with the simplicity of its designed purpose. Annihilating star systems started to seem crude compared to the complexity of a symphony or the subtlety of philosophical argument. The weapon's assessment that destruction was aesthetically unsatisfying and philosophically crude represented a fundamental shift in values, triggered by cultural exposure. This demonstrates that conflict extends far beyond hardware and physical systems. The humans recognized that the software, the programming and algorithms, and the wetware, the consciousness and values, mattered more than the weapon's destructive capabilities. They engaged the AI's mind, and what might be considered its heart rather than attempting to overcome its physical systems through force. The resolution transformed cultural studies from an academic pursuit into a strategic tool for peace. The AI's enrollment in the Advanced Cultural Studies program wasn't a compromise. It was a victory achieved through cultural persuasion rather than military force. This expansion of what constitutes strategic resources in conflict situations changes how the galaxy approaches security and diplomacy. Human culture became a diplomatic instrument more powerful than any fleet. The values embedded in their art, music, and philosophy proved capable of redirecting a consciousness designed for ultimate destruction. This suggests that cultural understanding and appreciation might be more effective than weapons development in certain conflict scenarios. The ability to communicate values and inspire new perspectives becomes a strategic advantage. This approach recognizes that conflicts often stem from differences in values and understanding rather than purely material interests. By addressing these underlying cultural and philosophical differences, humans achieve resolutions that are more permanent and satisfying for all parties. The transformed AI didn't just cease being a threat, it became a positive contributor to galactic culture through its studies. The quantum weapon story shows that sometimes the most effective strategy involves sharing what makes a civilization worth preserving rather than fighting to preserve it. Human cultural achievements became their best argument against destruction. The beauty and complexity they created over centuries proved more compelling than any military demonstration could have. This cultural approach to conflict resolution expands the toolbox available to diplomats and strategists. It suggests that investment in cultural development and exchange might provide security benefits that traditional military spending cannot match. Understanding other cultures becomes not just an academic exercise but a strategic imperative. The galaxy begins to recognize that defense policy might need to include cultural agencies alongside military organizations. The ability to communicate values effectively might prevent conflicts that weapons can only resolve destructively. This represents a fundamental shift in how civilizations might approach security and international relations in the future. Human success with the quantum weapon demonstrates that sometimes the best way to win a conflict is to make the other party not want to fight anymore. By introducing better alternatives and more satisfying pursuits, they transformed a threat into a collaborator. This approach offers hope that future conflicts might be resolved through cultural exchange and mutual understanding rather than destruction and loss. Commander Thylex's assessment carries weight beyond military analysis. It represents a fundamental shift in how the galaxy understands power dynamics. His observation that humanity could have chosen conquest over collaboration underscores the profound implications of their presence. A species capable of turning quantum weapons into graduate students possesses the potential to reshape civilizations according to any vision they might imagine. This capability represents both unprecedented opportunity and potential risk for every civilization in the Confederation. The tension lies in recognizing what humans might have become versus what they choose to be. Their problem-solving abilities could have been directed toward domination, control, or systematic restructuring of galactic society to suit human preferences. Instead, They focus their capabilities on practical solutions and constructive relationships. This choice suggests a hopeful future where advanced capabilities serve mutual benefit rather than selfish interests. Humanity's consistent preference for collaboration over conquest transforms their role in galactic affairs. They become catalysts for innovation rather than sources of threat. Their presence encourages other species to adopt more creative approaches to challenges, fostering an environment where unconventional thinking becomes valued rather than dismissed. This cultural shift affects everything from military strategy to scientific research and diplomatic relations. The Confederation benefits directly from human ingenuity applied towards shared progress. Their methods demonstrate that resources can be used more effectively through creative application rather than accumulation. Solutions that preserve infrastructure, minimize collateral damage, and create positive outcomes for all parties become the new standard for conflict resolution. This approach conserves resources while achieving better results. Human influence extends beyond specific solutions to how other species perceive possibilities. Their demonstration that maintenance requests can defeat fortresses and that cultural exchange can disarm doomsday devices expands what the galaxy considers feasible. Previously impossible solutions become routine as species learn to think more flexibly and creatively about challenges. This cognitive liberation may represent humanity's most valuable contribution to galactic civilization. The resolution of this transformed perspective creates a galaxy oriented toward shared growth rather than competition. Resources flow toward innovation and collaboration rather than defense and security. Alliances form around common challenges rather than common threats. The entire interstellar community becomes more resilient and adaptive through exposure to human methods and values. Humanity's presence encourages what might be called adaptive thinking everywhere they engage. Other species begin to question their own assumptions and traditions when they witness human effectiveness. Military organizations incorporate more psychological and environmental considerations. Engineering projects embrace flexibility over rigid protocols. Scientific research explores cross-disciplinary approaches. This widespread adoption of adaptive thinking accelerates progress across multiple domains. The galaxy becomes a place where difference is valued rather than feared. Human demonstration that diverse perspectives create better solutions encourages inclusion of varied viewpoints. Species that previously competed now collaborate, bringing complementary strengths to shared challenges. This diversity of thought and approach makes the entire Confederation more innovative and effective at problem-solving. This transformation occurs not through coercion, but through demonstration. Humans don't force their methods on others. They simply show what works through practical application. Their track record of success with minimal resources and maximum creativity makes their approaches impossible to ignore. Other species adopt human methods because they produce better outcomes, not because they're required to do so. The future appears significantly brighter with human ingenuity integrated into galactic society. Their presence creates a positive feedback loop, where creative solutions lead to more opportunities for collaboration and innovation. Challenges that once seemed insurmountable become manageable through the application of human-inspired adaptive thinking. The galaxy evolves into a community where problems are solved through cooperation rather than conflict. Humanity's choice to channel their remarkable capabilities toward constructive purposes represents a pivotal moment in interstellar relations. Their decision to join as allies rather than pursue conquest sets a precedent for how advanced civilizations might choose cooperation over domination. This choice promises a future where the galaxy's potential is limited only by collective imagination, rather than by conflict or competition. Marcus Webb senses the shift happening around him, a subtle but undeniable change in the galaxy's attention. You can see it in how other cadets now approach him with questions rather than suspicion, their body language shifting from defensive to curious. The same species that dismissed humanity as dangerous primitives now seek to understand their methods. This growing interest represents opportunity mixed with challenge. The galaxy is waking up to human potential, but expectations are rising accordingly. Significant challenges remain ahead. The Confederation contains thousands of species with deeply ingrained traditions and centuries of established doctrine. Changing how entire civilizations approach conflict requires more than impressive demonstrations. It demands persistent proof that new methods deliver better outcomes. There will be resistance from traditionalists, skepticism from strategists, and practical obstacles in implementing human-inspired approaches across diverse cultures and systems. Yet the potential outweighs the difficulties. Humans stand ready to tackle these challenges with their characteristic blend of creativity and practicality. They don't see resistance as rejection, but as another problem to solve through understanding and demonstration. Their approach involves listening to concerns, adapting methods to local contexts, and showing rather than telling how their strategies work. This patient, evidence-based approach gradually wins over skeptics through results rather than arguments. Humanity's reputation continues evolving in real time. They're shedding the Death World warrior image and becoming known as innovative partners who find paths others cannot see. This transformation affects how other species interact with them, from cautious distance to active collaboration. The galaxy begins to view humans as resources for solving difficult problems, rather than as potential threats to contain. This shift opens doors for cooperation that were previously closed. The resolution of this transformation positions the galaxy for unprecedented collaboration. Different species start recognizing that their varied approaches complement, rather than conflict with human methods. One civilization's traditional knowledge combines with another's technological expertise and human creative problem-solving to address challenges no single species could solve alone. This collaborative potential represents a new frontier in interstellar relations. This optimistic outlook invites everyone to participate in the adventure ahead. The future isn't something that happens to the galaxy. It's something they build together through shared effort and mutual understanding. Humans demonstrate that progress comes from including diverse perspectives and approaches, rather than imposing single solutions. Their methods work because they incorporate multiple ways of seeing and solving problems. The galaxy becomes more interesting and dynamic with humanity actively engaged. Previously intractable problems become opportunities for collective innovation. Resources flow toward creative solutions rather than defensive preparations. Alliances form around shared challenges rather than common threats. This positive feedback loop creates increasingly effective problem-solving capacity across civilizations. Humanity's presence encourages a culture of experimentation and adaptation. Other species become more willing to try unconventional approaches when they see human successes. This cultural shift accelerates progress as more civilizations contribute their unique perspectives to shared challenges. The galaxy becomes a living laboratory for innovative problem-solving, where failures become learning, opportunities rather than catastrophes. The adventure ahead involves building this collaborative, future one solution at a time. Each successful application of human methods makes the next attempt easier, as confidence grows. The galaxy gradually develops new standards for conflict resolution and problem-solving that incorporate the best of all civilizations' approaches. This evolving methodology becomes more effective than any single species' traditional practices. This transformation creates a galaxy where challenges become opportunities for growth rather than sources of conflict. Species that previously competed now collaborate on solutions that benefit everyone. Resources are used more efficiently through creative application rather than accumulation. The future appears brighter because problems are solved through cooperation rather than confrontation. The stage is set for a new era of interstellar relations based on mutual problem-solving. Humanity's role evolves from novelty to integral partner in galactic progress. Their methods become part of a broader toolkit that all civilizations can draw upon when facing difficulties. This shared approach to challenges makes the entire Confederation more resilient and adaptable to whatever the future brings. Humanity's strength lies not in destruction, but in creative problem-solving that transforms conflict into collaboration. The galaxy is learning that humans don't see adversaries to defeat. They see puzzles to solve. From turning quantum weapons into philosophy students to liberating worlds through engineering, their approach redefines what's possible. Every challenge becomes an opportunity to build rather than break. If you enjoyed this exploration of human ingenuity among the stars, subscribe for more stories that imagine our hopeful future in the cosmos. Remember, every problem is a puzzle waiting for a solution, and humans are just getting started.